The movie begins with a group of pirates relaxing after one of their missions. One of them wanders off into the forest to relieve himself, and happens upon a cave. While checking it out, the ground beneath him shifts and he's pulled into the hole that was created. He screams, then disappears without a trace. Outside a Japanese machine gun nest that goes back to World War II, we find a millionaire called Tycoon as well as his sexy girlfriend. Tycoon shares his excitement over the location. Tino, the captain of the group of mercenaries Tycoon hired, calls for the attention of the former military engineer when he notices the man staring off in the distance. They panic when they hear a scream from inside the machine gun nest. It's coming from one of Tino's henchmen. He emerges from the machine gun nest carrying a skull, attempting to scare the group, then laughing at his own prank. After the incident, Tycoon scolds Tino for the way his men are acting. He promises it won't happen again. The last two henchmen that make up Tino's group tease each other with the skull that is just found. Tycoon brings a Japanese scientist with him to check out the machine gun nest. As they wait, the engineer asks Tino if he knows what Tycoon is looking for. Tino admits he has no idea and has no interest in finding out. The engineer explains that he'd like to know the basics of a job, and shares that he feels something's following them, especially since there are a lot of pirate activities around. The group continues on hiking deeper in the forest until they reach the entrance of a dead mine that used to be operated by the Dutch. The engineer theorizes that it was abandoned and then taken over by the Japanese. Tycoon then pipes up that the dead mine was repurposed and turned into a military bunker, which is exactly what they're looking for. The engineer informs them that he needs to check the place out since there are signs of recent seismic activity which would indicate that the whole place could be unstable. He asks the scientist how she ended up working for Tycoon. She discloses that she came along for her own research, wanting to know more about the Second World War, specifically how men could do the things they did. The engineer tells her that it's easy to explain how soldiers think. He tells her that to make a soldier you need to re-engineer them, breaking them down and then rebuilding them, leaving something different in place of their heart that will make them think it's okay to be a murderer. The group's suddenly under heavy fire from a group of pirates. The engineer's still not done checking out the mine, but they have no choice. Everyone runs inside. A henchman gets in last and realizes too late that a grenade was thrown after. When everyone regains consciousness, they find the henchman injured badly and the mine entrance has collapsed, blocking their exit. They pull him from under the rubble. The engineer calls for Tino's attention, to let him know that there's no way they're going out the same way they came in. He mentions that they could descend into the mine, but there's no guarantee that there's another way out. The group gets into an argument over whether or not the encounter with the pirates was a coincidence. They confront Tycoon over what it is they're looking for. Tycoon is adamant that there's no way anyone else knows about what they're doing since he has kept it under wraps. Annoyed, the engineer demands he tell them what it is they're searching for. The other man gives in and confesses that with the Japanese scientists' help they decoded a collection of papers that led them to their current location. In fact, they're looking for a Japanese military commander's treasure, but the engineer rejects its existence and Tycoon explains that it's not in the Philippines, but they believe there's some in that particular dead mine. Before the argument between the engineer and Tycoon gets physical, Tino points out that they have more pressing matters, specifically looking for a way out. Then the group travels deeper. As they're crossing deep into the mines, the lights around them suddenly turn on and a war propaganda song starts blaring from the speakers around them. Everybody's confused about how everything started since they're under the assumption that the mine has been abandoned ages ago. Tycoon asks if it's possible that it's due to the damage to the mines. Tino scoffs at the implication, but Tycoon points out there's no way someone else is in there, since the entrance was untouched. But the engineer states that this is good news for them because it means there's another way out. They come across room after room filled with bottles, hazmat suits, shelves and old disturbing images. They find one that Tino calls a communication center. The Japanese scientist approaches one of the maps tacked on the wall and Tycoon walks up to her. As they're checking the place out, a man wearing a gas mask stands behind one henchman, but nobody notices that. By the time the man turns around, he's gone. The map that the Japanese scientist was observing seems to be of the mines. The markings for the mine refer to the 25th Area Army, which Tycoon believes confirms that this is one of the Japanese commander's hideouts. The engineer thinks there's more to the story and asks Tycoon directly what else is there. He argues that it isn't a standard bunker, which he would know considering his time in the military. Despite protests from Tycoon, the Japanese scientist reveals that they found out the mines were an operating center of Unit 731, a secret medical research unit that specializes in biological and chemical warfare development through lethal human experimentations. The group's upset, but Tycoon's girlfriend speaks up that it doesn't matter since everyone was paid to do their job. Tycoon asserts that he didn't know what they were facing, which is why he cannot prepare everybody for what is to come. The henchman asks what's the connection between the secret medical research unit and the commander's treasure. He thinks that Unit 731 was just a cover-up to keep everyone away. As they delve deeper, they come across a bunker where Tino decides to split up so that his man can rest on a pallet bench. However, Tycoon and his girlfriend insist on going with them to search for a way out, as well as continue looking for the commander's treasure. The three of them stay behind to keep the injured man company. Tino's group comes across another room containing cages. Tycoon finds a helmet issued by the Australian government, meaning that those in the room were prisoners of war. Tino comments that it must mean they're for whatever experiments the Japanese military conducted, but Tycoon denies this. The engineer asks the Japanese scientist if Unit 731 was the reason why she joined Tycoon's group. She acknowledges this. While resting, the man hears scraping. He sits up and looks down. He sees the ground shifting before hands come up to grab him by the legs and pull him into the hole created. The three catch a glimpse of a mutant who runs away at the sight of them. The engineer demands the Japanese scientist to tell them what the mutant is, but she denies knowing what it is. The man jumps into the hole to follow after his fellow. With no other choice, the engineer and the Japanese scientist jump after as well. The engineer and the Japanese scientist find the henchman's body. His throat is slit and his eyes unseeing. The engineer comforts her and tells her to keep moving. They're so distracted that they don't notice the man wearing a gas mask until it's too late. He knocks out the engineer as the Japanese scientist yells. Meanwhile, one of the mutants grabs the man and throws him toward a cavern filled with human remains. He calls out for his fellow. While checking the place out, he finds the mangled body of the pirate from the earlier scene. His body was most likely feasted on by the mutants. More mutants stalk him. One comes closer, but he immediately shoots it down. He examines the body and finds that the mutant has some kind of metal cage wrapped around its head. Catching him off guard, a mutant hits him on the back of his head, grabs his rifle, and then runs its mutant. The henchman fumbles for his pistol when another mutant attacks him, this time clawing at his eyes. He successfully subdues it, but the damage has been done to his sight. More of them show up and he can barely see them. As he's surrounded, he fires shot after shot until it jams. Knowing there's nothing he can do, he throws the pistol to the side and looks up at the ceiling. One of the mutants grabs him and he screams out. The engineer wakes up when he hears the war propaganda song playing again and someone speaking Japanese. He finds the gas mask wearing man who stops him from moving and brandishes a small sword at him. The man speaks to the Japanese scientist, who then translates to the engineer that they're now prisoners of the Japanese Imperial Army. She explains that the gas masked man thinks they're allied enemies. She tells him that the war is over, but obviously the man doesn't believe her. Tired of the back and forth, the engineer attacks the gas masked man. Before he can do further damage, she screams no. The engineer removes the mask the man's wearing and finds an ashen old face staring back at him. The Japanese scientist attempts to explain again to the gas-masked man that the war is over. She picks up her tablet to show old footage of the final Japanese surrender in 1945. The other man freaks out because of that and then goes to kneel in front of a body covered by the Japanese flag. While trying to look for a way out of the room, Tycoon gets attacked by a mutant from behind. It stabs Tycoon on his left shoulder with a bone. Tino shoots the mutant, but it barely registers. It switches its focus from Tycoon to Tino tackling the man and beating him up. Tino's henchman shoots at it, but it seems to only annoy the mutant. He finally grabs one of the broken-off metal shelves and uses it as a spear to stab the mutant on its side, finally killing it. The engineer and the Japanese scientist find out the gas-masked man's story. It turns out he was one of the two tasked to guard the mines for years. When the Japanese army left in 1945, they were sealed in. The gas-masked man's companion wanted to surrender. The two got into a fight with the gas-masked man, killing his companion. They learn that the mutants are prisoners of war, as Tino has suspected. The Japanese military experimented on the prisoners and would gas them, which transformed them into the mutants they see now. They then discovered a new process and turned their attention to their own men. The gas-masked man and many like him were injected to keep them young and strong, but it was just another failed experiment. The engineer assumes that the gas-masked man is the last of it, but he reveals that the formula is perfected and given to the best of the best, the Imperial Guards. Back to Tino's group, he calls for Tycoon's attention, pointing at a tattoo on the mutant's head written in Japanese. Tycoon translates it to Australian, 24 years, confirming that the mutant is a prisoner of war. Tino asks him how it's possible. Tycoon admits he doesn't know, but speculates that it's what Unit 731 is about. Giving up on the door where they came from, Tino decides that they should continue exploring the area they're in. In the next room, they find a dried up and mangled body, obviously in the middle of an experiment. Its stomach is sliced open and its brain protruding from its skull. Tycoon comes across a syringe filled with some unknown liquid, as well as flecks of gold, which he guesses is what the Japanese military has been using for their experiments. He becomes upset when he realizes that it's probably the last of the commander's treasures. While Tino and his man attempt to open the door, they find the girlfriend asks Tycoon why the gold was mixed in with whatever concoction the Japanese military came up with. He explains that it's believed to be the ancient elixir of life and the basis of alchemy. Tycoon is losing hope, but his girlfriend points out whatever inside the syringe obviously could turn the prisoners into mutants, which could mean that it's worth more than what the commander's treasure is. He hands over the syringe and asks his girlfriend to keep it safe for him. Finally opening the door, Tino and his man come across a large chamber, filled with hundreds of figures in samurai suits. It looks like they've stumbled upon the Imperial Guard that was experimented on. The group suddenly comes to life and starts advancing despite Tino's warning. Tino and his man shoot at them, but it barely grazes them. Tino orders Tycoon and his girlfriend to move while the henchman stays behind. Tino leads the other two towards a metal grate leading to the drain system, but his man is killed as they escape. The other three end up in the cavern where the henchman was killed. They find his mutilated body. As Tino examines his man's body, Tycoon is tackled by another mutant. The injured Tino can barely fight it off as it pummels Tycoon. He finds a broken off bone and uses it to stab and kill the mutant. They go back to the sewage system and finally end up in the room where the two and the gas masked man are in. Tino asks the engineer if the gas masked man knows a way out. The engineer shares that he thinks he has an idea, since the mutants are able to go out and find food as well as hunt animals. On the other hand, the girlfriend quietly pulls out the syringe and stabs Tycoon with it. Since the man is barely holding on, the Imperial Guard catches up to them and everyone scrambles to escape. However, the gas masked man doesn't join them. He kneels in front of one of the Imperial Guard and offers his life for failing the Japanese military. Back in the cavern, one of the Japanese Imperial Guard releases a mutant from the metal cage on its head. The group ends up in what they believe to be the exit. They're ambushed by a couple of mutants. Tycoon's girlfriend panics and tries to force the door open as the Japanese scientist grabs a large rock to help the engineer kill one of the mutants. When the girlfriend finally opens the door, she helps Tycoon inside but locks the rest of the group out. She finds the tunnel that the mutants are using to enter and exit the mines. Unfortunately for her, Tycoon has been driven insane by the formula she injected into him and he kills her in an instant. The remaining three are cornered by the guard. The Japanese scientist comes across another drain leading to the sewage system. To give the two a chance, Tino stays behind. The other two end up in water now and the Japanese scientist finds another grate leading outside. Before the engineer can follow her, an Imperial Guard jumps next to him. Only the Japanese scientist manages to escape and ends up in the middle of a lake. She swims towards the shore. Sadly, an Imperial Guard emerges from the water. Exhausted, she tries to fight him off with a branch. The Imperial Guard backhands her and then lifts her by the throat. Right then, more of them appear from the water. Seeing their comrade, it throws the Japanese scientist to the side and then wields its katana. The movie ends with the Imperial Guard swinging his katana just as she screams at him. Subscribe to watch more videos like this, turn on notifications, and leave a like to help the channel out. Thank you for watching. You should check these recaps.